The journey Mason embarked on was unlike any rescue mission he'd undertaken before. It began in small, painful steps. His body, once accustomed to charging headfirst into burning buildings, now buckled beneath its own weight. The doctors had told him to manage his expectations, that his disease would only get worse. But Mason wasn't one to let a diagnosis dictate his destiny. He spent weeks just mustering the courage to move from his bed to the chair by the window. Each success was met with new setbacks, falls, frustration, and nights spent questioning why he was even trying. Yet, with Jake cheering him on, scribbling colorful drawings of Mason as a superhero plastered around his room, he knew quitting wasn't an option. Progress was measured not in strides, but in inches. Still, each inch carried him closer to becoming the father Jake believed he was. One day, as Mason shuffled through his rehab exercises, he overheard a story from his physical therapist about an upcoming charity climb on a nearby mountain. The thought was absurd. He couldn't even walk more than 20 feet without collapsing, let alone climb a mountain. Yet, that night, as he stared at the crayon drawing Jake had left on the nightstand, a stick figure of Mason standing triumphantly on a peak while holding a flag, something awoke inside him. The next morning, Mason told his therapist he wanted to sign up. Laughter met his declaration, not out of malice, but disbelief. The climb was merely weeks away, and Mason's body was nowhere close to ready. But Mason didn't care. For the first time in months, there was fire in his voice, a spark reminiscent of the fearless firefighter he once was. He began training relentlessly. His sessions now pushed past the physical pain, driven by sheer determination. On the days he couldn't lift his legs, he focused on strengthening his arms. When doubt crept in, he drowned it out by whispering promises to Jake. "I'll do this for us." Slowly, Mason began to redefine what his new normal could look like. When the day of the climb arrived, the air was thick with anticipation. Hundreds of participants gathered, each with their own struggles and stories, a reminder that extraordinary challenges often unite the most resilient souls. Mason stood at the base of the mountain, his legs shaking but his resolve ironclad. He wasn't here to prove anything to others. He was here to show his son that strength isn't in the absence of fear, but the courage to face it head-on. The first mile was agonizing. Every step felt like dragging a boulder uphill. His breaths grew shallower as he battled the sharp pangs in his body. Fellow climbers offered words of encouragement, but it was Jake's cheers from down below that pierced through the fog of exhaustion. "You're my hero, Dad. Keep going." Tears blurred Mason's vision, but he pushed on. When he stumbled, a fellow climber offered a hand, pulling him upright. This wasn't an individual battle, Mason realized. It was a collective triumph. Each step became a testament to the unbreakable will of the human spirit. Hours turned into a blur of pain and perseverance. But as he neared the summit, the crowd's cheers grew louder. Mason collapsed onto his knees just feet away from the peak, his body screaming to stop. But then he saw it. Jake, waiting at the top, holding the same makeshift flag he'd drawn weeks earlier. Through sheer grit, Mason clawed his way to the finish, falling into his son's embrace. In that moment, it wasn't about the climb, the pain, or even the disease. It was about what the climb represented: hope, determination, and the belief that some battles are worth fighting, no matter how insurmountable they seem. Mason's story reminds us all that strength isn't measured by how far you can go, but by the fact that you keep going at all. So now I ask you, what mountain are you climbing? What challenge are you ready to face? If Mason can find triumph in the face of despair, imagine what you're capable of when you take that first step. Subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of the resilience within us all.